Okay, so I think we need to get into our new line of questioning now, which is a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about your first fairy experience. And we've sort of established that we have to use words to convey different things
Yeah.
here. So, you kind of, just to sort of summarize for our listener at home, and also just to make sure that I'm on the same page as you, you kind of always felt that there was something that you were connected to. And that was really ignited within you within that situation where your brother was showing you this spiritual text and you had this remembrance. You've been on this journey where you're kind of navigating life as a human and also identifying yourself, as you go along as a soul, learning more and more about that. You're understanding a bit about, how to kind of navigate as a soul here on human. But there's along the journey, there's been something that's happened to you where you have really connected with the fairy realm. So did that happen in a visualization? Did it happen in a meditation? Did it happen in England in a forest, for example? How did that sort of kick itself off? And can you talk a little bit about that in terms of your experience where you knew, wait a minute, I am fairy? Like, that doesn't just happen every day.
No, it doesn't happen every day. And it didn't happen for me in my first, I would say, fairy experience. And I'm wondering if, before I answer this question, do you think it might be helpful to ground your listeners in context if I share how I see fairy, the beings that are fairy?
Yes.
And because I know there's a lot of, again, people have different ideas about that.
Yes, let's do that.
So,
yeah.
okay. And then I can definitely, like, let's dive into those experiences. So
Yeah.
what I'm basically going to share is I am fast forwarding everybody to about 5 years into my fairy journey. And by fairy journey, I mean, at this point I had made contact. I had begun working with these beings. I had not only begun working with them, but I had the remembrance then of that being who I was at a soul level, which was like a whole nother can of worms that opened up. And then I had also had this huge realization and awakening around my purpose being connected to fairy. So I was deep in working with the fairy realm. I was deep in bringing forward healing, a beautiful healing technology that I called fairy light healing at the time. I was deep in all of this. And it was actually 2012. And it was around my Saturn return where everything started to crumble. And what happened is that prior to that, and to give you like context, I had been training. I never trained with a human in terms of my work with fairy. All of that has been mentored by my allies on the inner planes. So that is where I have received all that I know, that I share about fairy. And it's also all the remembrances that I've had. So it just comes from my own experience and my own embodied, truth. That being said, I have had many beautiful and challenging human teachers in the psychic and healing arts. And I want to give so much credit to those early teachers, because had it not been for their training in the psychic arts, I wouldn't have had the tools to be able to have these beautiful communications that then evolved over time. Okay, so I'm deep in these communications, right? And so for whatever reason, and I think it was maybe because it was the magical child in me that was leading, the child does not ask those questions from the head that we adults want to know. The child just trusts. It just is, right?
Yes.
If an elephant is purple, they don't say, why is the elephant purple? They say, look at the purple elephant and how can we bring it flowers or whatever. It's like the questions, there are questions, but the questions are different. They're not the questions that we ask that limit the experience. So I don't know to this day why I hadn't asked the question before. But to me, when I worked with Faery, I worked with a multitude of beings that for some reason I called all of them Faery. Many of them were very different. And by that, I meant they usually fell into two categories. One were what I would call more nature spirits. They were connected to the spirits of trees and forests and plants and rivers. Okay, these were nature spirit energies. I called them Faery. And then these other beings were great shining beings. These shining beings that maybe in some people's repertoire could be confused with even angels, but they were very deeply rooted and connected to the earth. Well, how did I know that? I just knew that. I knew that from the way that they expressed in their energy. I had worked with angels at that time too, and they had a different frequency than angels. Mm. But to me, I just grouped it all in Faery. Never asked any questions. The way that I worked it out in the mind, is that I told myself that, like the nature spirits are just the ones, the younger souls, the younger spirits, and the ones that were large and great and shining, if you had to make them, I hate to do, can I do it? They're like, one last time. So like the great shining, by shining, I'm like Lord of the Rings elves, right? Like these grand presences. Okay. Those are not like freaking Tinkerbell. They're like, oh, no more forms. We're breaking forms. I'm like, yes. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. So anyway, they have to, they abide.
So they look like Lord of the Rings. Okay. With you.
Oh God, I'm never going to live this down. They're going to give me hell for like the next year. Another 100 humans are talking about us like we're Lord of the Rings elves. Great, Diomira. Thank you. You've just set us back 10 years. Oh, I know. Okay. So you guys, we're going to see that, and then we're going to release that because we're breaking through expectations and connotations, right? And so I just saw those energies, those beings, as I just thought, okay, those are when they get to a more evolved state. And those are like sovereign in their consciousness. They are the same way we would say an evolved human might be an ascended master, right? Or might be enlightened. I was like, oh, these are like the ascended aspects of Fae consciousness. That's how I worked it out in my mind. Okay, well, the year 2012 happened. A number of things, which I'm not going to go into right now, started happening that made me start questioning that simplification. And what it ended up resulting in, first of all, was about 3 years of confusion to the point where I actually stopped teaching, because I was like, you know what, if I'm not clear about this, I just can't teach right now, because I need to be clear about this. And I have in question, like, okay, who have I been talking to? And it wasn't that I thought that anything negative, or so nothing like that, but it was almost like this, like my whole identity started unraveling. Like here I was so confident that this was just the Faery frequency. This was the Faery realm. And I was talking to beings in the Faery realm. And it was this moment that a number of things started happening where I started to realize that they were two completely different species. They're two completely different beings, completely different. It'd be like comparing an angel to Bigfoot. It's like, okay, they might have, they're both interdimensional beings, angels and Bigfoots, right? I'm making a very extreme analogy. This is not a one-to-one correspondence, but they're both interdimensional beings, but hello, they are not even in the same like gene pool. Not even close, right? A mer energy and Bigfoot, different gene pool. It's a different species. They're both inner earth species, meaning beings that exist on the interdimensional planes of the Gaian system, but they're not related.
It's like human and dog.
Yes, exactly. Or, even, and I've made this analogy before, and I wonder if it's more correct, and I'm, again, still in an inquiry, but it'd be like comparing, a zebra with a wolf. They're both in the animal kingdom, and yet they're not even like the same at all, right? They're completely different species. And so this was how what started to happen is this whole breakdown. And as the breakdown happened, I started to make some sense. And here's what I've worked up. And this is how I see, and everybody sees this a little differently. I just did a fabulous interview that'll be released soon with a person, and he and I had a great conversation because he also works with these beings, and we talked a little bit about this. So everybody has a little bit of a different cosmology and perspective depending on how you work with these inner realms. But this is how I've worked it out. The nature spirit kingdom, and we can put in that kingdom the Davic energies, which are like the highest form of the nature spirit kingdom. Those are like the earth angels, right? The nature spirit kingdom is also what I would, in a lot of ways, connect with the elementals. These are what a lot of people are working with, the elemental energies, the nature kingdom energies. These energies are beautiful, but they are not the fairy people who I'm talking about. The fairy people who I'm talking about.
Music for that, like
we need popcorn. We need a drum roll.
Blackout. We'll see you next week on part.
Yes.
Although we're already into part 2, so sorry.
We're already into part 2. Sorry.
Okay, I'm at the edge of my seat. What?
Okay. The beings that are fairy are those that the best word that I use to call them now is the she, Sidhe. Okay. And the she, this is an Irish Gaelic word. So the people of Ireland have known that there are differences. They know that the leprechauns, for example, are not the same as the fairy people. They would never confuse the two. They never do in their conversations. They're two totally different energies. Yeah. So you have the elemental beings that are like the leprechauns of Ireland. They are every culture has them, the kobolds of Germany, the aluches of the Yucatan in Mexico. Every culture has these little people, right? The little people. And then those connected more with the nature kingdom, the plant spirits. And then you have these fairy people that are not, these are the ones that we share an ancestor with, that if you go back far enough, we are connected by blood and spirit with. These are the she, and the she translates to the people of peace. And the best way that I can describe them is that a lot of the early myths, when they describe the shining ones, when they describe even some beings that ended up being deified, for example, the Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, and a multitude of other cultures also talk about the shining ones. When they were talking about the shining ones, and usually the myth goes something like this, it does in Ireland, at least in the Book of Invasions, that the fairy people are the Tuatha De Danann, which means children of the goddess Danu. They populated the earth. They had magical powers. They came from the north, which just means from a different dimension, and they pretty much ruled. They were like on top of the food chain, so to speak. And then at some point, you see this battle that ensues between what is somewhat more modern man and the Tuatha De Danann, and these battles take place and they go back and forth and on and on. And at some point, the Tuatha De Danann lose. And when they lose, they retreat into, this is according to myth, into the Hollow Hills, and they live inside the earth, according to myth, because when they lost, the earth was divided into two, and the Tuatha De Danann, having lost, they had to go down they got the bottom half, and the humans, the surface dwellers, Middle Earth, Midgard people, they got the middle world. And that's how that went down. And so all of the beautiful myths and legends that are talking about the Shining Ones, that talk about beings that are more elven in character. I'm not talking about Keebler elves. I'm talking about great elven creatures like the Norse mythology, right? We have the elven creatures in the Norse mythology. We have them in Gaelic. We have them in all these beautiful cultures. And these were the original peoples of Gaia. They are not, however, children of Gaia. And what I mean by that is, unlike the elementals who arose from the heart of Gaia, they were birthed from her womb. Of course, we all are, our bodies are, right? But our souls are not. The elemental souls are birthed from the heart of Gaia. She birthed them.
And they're responsible for the trees and the flowers.
Yes, exactly. Those are all of the nature kingdom. That's all of the nature kingdom. They're responsible for that.
That's why they're the children of Gaia, because they help Gaia.
That's why they're the children of Gaia.
Yeah, I get it.
Yes. And whereas the elven or fairy people, or the Sidhe, these beings have come from the stars, just like we once did. And the difference is, of course, they haven't forgotten their connection to the stars, but they also haven't gotten so obsessed with the stars that they've forgotten that they're also anchored here and have chosen to have an earth experience. So it's this beautiful, this is the wisdom that they can impart. And I won't go too far down that tangent at the moment, but I just wanted to kind of ground us into this, is that these are very different beings. And here's where it can get very confusing, even for the most advanced psychic, even for the most advanced traveler of the inner planes, is that the Sidhe work very closely with the spirits of nature. I learned everything I've learned about the nature spirits, but working with the nature spirits, everything I've learned about the spirits of crystals, the spirits of trees, I learned from the fairy people. I learned from the Sidhe. They taught me everything I know. And so they have a close relationship with the elementals. And so it becomes quite confusing and conflated. And like I said, and then in the grand scheme of things, does it matter? How much does it matter? I don't know. All I know is when I found out and realized that, oh wait, these are two separate energies. These are two separate beings. Something within me, like it unraveled, and it had to find my I had to find my center again, because it was, for whatever reason, it was important to my journey that I had to make sense of that. And now I feel like I have, in a way that it makes sense and it works for me, and I still continue to evolve it. And so that's what I want to say in terms of like grounding us into the context of who the fairies are from my perspective. Doesn't mean you still can't use the word fairy, if you want to refer to nature spirits, but just so we're all on the same page as much as possible, I thought that would be helpful.
I like that. It's interesting to hear the distinction. So let me just make sure I kind of understand. So the children of Gaia, aka modern, or what we would think is a fairy, elementals. Would you call them more elementals, and then the Sidhe you would refer to as fairy?
So for me, just because I've worked up my own vocabulary, and this is what, as I was saying, the interview I just had, we actually have different terminology for things, but
love that.
But for me, just because I am reclaiming the word fairy in terms of what I feel it means. Fairy, if we go to the etymology of the word, it comes from the Latin word fate. It comes from the Latin word fate, which meant fate or destiny, meaning that our fate and our destiny, human and the fairy people, are intertwined. And so to me, as much as, right. So for me, it's been this reclamation of, I know it might be easier if I might use a different word, it's been a journey, and I continue to use the word fairy because for me, it's the truest in terms of what feels authentic to the frequency that I'm speaking to when I'm talking about that which is both waking up within us, with those of us who have a resonance to fairy, those of us who have a connection to fairy, it's more than likely because the frequency of fairy is waking up within you. And it's the fairy out there that is, there's a vibration, there's a mutual vibration and resonance docking happening with us and them, and they are calling us, and we, our souls, are calling them, and there's this resounding reverberation going back and forth, and that is the she, that is the fairy people. So that is why I continue to use the word fairy, and I will often use synonymously with fairy. I will use she. I will say fairy or she, and I'm talking about the shining ones, the people of peace.
Okay, so are you kind of saying though that
Yeah.
everything is fairy in a way, and then you would, because if you and I were talking about the children of Gaia, you would call them the children of Gaia if we had to, because we are human, we have, and I'm like, I know I'm getting caught up in semantics and it doesn't matter.
No, it's perfect.
But I hear my listener at home being like, well, if I'm talking about the children of Gaia, or if I'm talking about the she, and then I'm talking about myself, are we all fairy? Is it all fated? Are we all, because we're all the one? Like, see, right. This is where we go, okay, well, our brains can't always compute everything, but I mean, we can kind of see, you know, the she, and then it does make sense. What you've said makes a hell of a lot of sense, I think.
So the other beings, I usually call those beings nature spirits. That's usually, I say the nature spirit kingdom. Okay. That's usually what I say, because just to make it even more complicated, the little people are actually, it's actually a separate, it's a sort of middle of the road bandwidth between the she and the
so it's the
nature spirits,
like the angelics of the elemental world, the kind of, right?
Yeah, so the angelics of the elemental world, I call the devas.
Okay, just to go. And okay,
I know it's complex, right?
It's interesting, and you know, we could probably talk about this forever, and I think we'd like to move on because we want to talk about other things.
Yeah. And remember, everyone, this is just my language that I've worked up for myself, because it makes sense.
But I love that what you're saying is, you know, you're going, girl, we can't talk about the fairy world in an hour, let alone we could, you know, like it's so much more vast than that. And a lot of what we understand from part one and now part two is that you have to feel into it for your own truth. You have to see that for yourself. Can I ask you a question about the she? Do you, are they star people in your mind?
Yes, in that they originally came from the stars, but they're no more star people than we are.
Okay.
And by we, I mean humans.
Yeah, because
I mean, most of us kind of feel like we came from the stars, right?
Yeah.
This ain't our first rodeo.
No. Okay, so now that we've understood that the whole idea of the fairy world is way bigger than we're going to be able to really get into today, I feel like we need a graph, and like maybe in your next book, it'll be like picture book, and you can have graphs and you can teach us Lord of the Rings style, you know, with maps and stuff. That would be very cool. Feel free to do that and I'll buy your book. But yeah, so actually I have to ask though, okay, I don't know, maybe we do need to talk a little bit more about it, because I keep wanting to ask about mer people now and mermaids. And do you want to talk a little bit more about this idea and the angelics of the fairy? Like, maybe I don't need to cut it short because it's fascinating, and maybe this is actually the conversation that we need to have today, because I'm actually feeling like intuitively I can't leave it. I'm trying to leave it, but I can't leave it. Yeah,
and
that's funny.
So the other thing that I want to say for context is that, you know, I love what you said, like, oh yeah, it's just really all one, because I think I actually add to the conflation sometimes, because I use the word fairy and sometimes I use it to mean different things. And I will use the word fairy and I think this is important for those specific beings that we just spent 20 minutes like going down, like, okay, these are the fairy people. Like I absolutely use it for that. But I also use fairy in two other ways. One, I use fairy to refer to the realm, and by realm, it's an energetic, right? It's a bandwidth, the realm in which many of these beings reside within. If you have the ability to key into that dimensional frequency, then you may meet all of these energies and more. And if you are in interaction with these beings, and I'm saying, you know, the listeners, if you are encountering and interacting with all these beings, you know, one of the worst things we can do as we're in these beautiful heart communions is go into our head about, okay, wait, let me flip through. First of all, throw out your fairy dictionary. Okay, those just need to go in the garbage. Those are like those things are not helpful. They're about as helpful as dream dictionaries, which are not helpful at all. So throw out the fairy dictionary and don't go into who are you? And wait, let me look up who you are. Do we do that when we meet a human? Do we say, wait, I need to stop and figure out like what your ethnicity is, what all of your stuff is? Like, no, we don't do that. We just meet them where they are. We let them divulge what they want to divulge, and we just begin an encounter. And I want to invite everybody into this, is that as much as we're having this conversation because it's fun and we like talking about these things, and I like talking about it. You know, like I said, I worked. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. And I want to also, when you're in the moment, you know, don't go into all that. Just set it down and let the experience be what the experience is. You can unpack it afterwards, and it may not matter. It may not matter if you're having a heart communion with another being that you are sharing this planetary system with. There is a beautiful exchange happening of energy that goes way beyond anything that your brain is going to comprehend, of how powerful, how beautiful, how magical, and how helpful that may be to yours and their evolutionary journey at this time. So I just want to say that. And that's then so the other way. Yeah.
And also I just want to say as well, just, you know, for fun, because I also was talking to someone recently and they were talking about how spirit guides and the like are just personifications of source. So then, you know, that's another way of looking at it as well. It's like,
there's so many perspectives,
you know. Yeah, exactly. So
there's so many perspectives. And I think when, you know, when you're starting out on this journey, first of all, I do think it's important to have a guide, a mentor, you know, whether it's Lauren, whether it's somebody like myself, whoever it is. And the reason is because it's very vast. And it's like a both and, because I feel like on one hand, we all have these abilities within us. They're waking up now, fast and furious on this planet. People are waking up more and more. And we also need to anchor in proper training, proper protocols. You know, we don't want to just go traipsing around in the spirit world and not know what we're doing. You know, yeah, I really want to bring more respect to, especially like with fairy. That's been one of my huge things, is that, you know, without poo-pooing anything else out there, but like really just for my own self and from the work that I want to share, is that I really think it's important to, you know, we want to be respectful and mindful about our interactions and with these beings. And so I'll leave that there, because I don't want to go get on my soapbox.
But, you know, I do think that it's about discernment. It's about respect. It's about, if you're exploring, and when we're talking about that, we're talking about that in your imagination through meditation. You know, when you're out and you're exploring new realms and doing things, it's about having that discernment. It's about listening to, you know, your inner guidance. And it's like you said, it's about also being aware that when you are kind of, I want to say traipsing around, but when you're like, let's say traipsing around, for lack of a better word, into new unseen territories, that those are not your place to be, maybe. So have a think about that, call in your, maybe Michael, working with Archangel Michael, if that resonates with you. Everyone's got their own way of doing things, but maybe have a think about, or have a feel into, rather, not think, have a feel into what is right for you. Would you say it's about that discernment again, coming back?
Discernment is so huge and so important in this work. Discernment on, and thank you, because that actually looped me back around to what I was saying, is that discernment on, first of all, in the human world, of who you want to work with, who you want to train with. And the reason I was saying that, like, and I can speak to this because I've had some really bad teachers. And those bad teachers taught me just as much. They really did, but it was painful. And so it just depends on the journey you want to have. And so everybody has, like Lauren was sharing, like this other person had this perspective on the spirit guides. We all, based on our work, our experience, based on our different cosmological views we come from, and, just lenses that we wear that we don't even realize we're wearing, we have our own ways of working. Certain ones are going to resonate with certain people. Follow what resonates. It's not right or wrong. If you follow what feels good, it's going to be right for you right now. And then when it's not, it just falls off, and you can choose your next step. But I would say that discernment in the human world, when you're working with, okay, all these, especially now in the age of the internet, we didn't have all this when I was like, I didn't have social media when I was starting on my spiritual journey. No, so yes, there was the internet, like AOL, chat, whatever rooms, but there were these forums, right? But there was no social media. So in a way, I think I was blessed because I didn't have all these things coming at me from these million different angles. So you really have to get razor sharp discernment on, okay, just shut off everything, shut off the device, shut off the thing, get all the things out of your ears, and just take a moment and be like, well, how did that feel for me? Did that feel right? That's number one. And then on the other flip side, in the spirit world, when you're doing this work, I had to hone my discernment. I'm still honing 20 years in the psychic field, doing field work. I didn't just train with teachers, right? And have go to weekend workshops. I mean, I trained in years and 3 and 5 year long apprenticeships. And then they threw us out in the field, and we had to actually we had to operate in the field. We were field agents. I've been a field agent for 20 years. And field work is so valuable because you figure out all the stuff that you don't know when you're in the field. You figure out all the holes in what you thought in your training. And that's when, the rubber kind of meets the road. And again, this is not to scare anyone, but this is just to let you know, if this was easy, everyone would be doing it, and they would all be doing it amazingly. And it's so beautiful. And discernment, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I will say, I had a dream a while ago, and I remember I had a couple of, I would classify them as fairy beings. Now I'm not so sure, but I would say fairy. And I remember I'm in my dream, and they say, hey, come with us to this magical forest over here. And I remember in my dream, I went, nope, I'm not going anywhere with you. And I didn't, and I chose not to do that. And it's just, I wanted to bring that up because I thought it was such a funny little example of even me using discernment in my dreams. And so when we learn to practice discernment in real life, like in our waking hours, we can learn to then integrate it through meditation, through our dream state. And it's always really important to come back and say to yourself, wait a minute, I have a choice here. I can do that, or I don't have to if I don't want to.
Yeah. And I'll give a little tip. One of the things that I learned, and again, this was a hard-earned lesson, so I'm giving this to everyone pretty easily. So one of the things that I learned was that if you don't want to do something, or if any part of you doesn't feel 100%, say no. And that goes for, that's a great boundary, right? In the human world too, but I'm specifically talking about in the spirit world. And the reason I'm saying this is, yes, there's the whole, okay, if something doesn't feel right, if it feels off, that's your body signaling. But what I'm saying is that we tend to, for a long time, I projected some of my unresolved shadow pieces onto the spirit world. So one of the things that I did early on, because I had a huge unworthiness story about not being worthy. And so one of the things that I did is that I would say yes, even when I didn't have the energetic capacity or bandwidth to carry something out. It could have been something as simple as, can you undertake this? I did a lot of healing for land ceremony. Land would always ask me, spirits of land would ask me to facilitate reconciliations on land with energy lines and that sort of thing. And I said yes, always, even though there were times where I was very burnt out and I was very overburdened. And what I saw, and it took me a long time to see this, was I was playing out that whole, oh, I have to deserve love. The way that I need to deserve love is by taking on all of this stuff that I really don't have the capacity for. And I just want, so if I had really been true to myself in some of those moments, when a being who I might have deeply loved and deeply been in a relationship with, right? And so I want to be a good ally. I want to be a good human ally. And they make a request of me. And instead of me saying, no, I can't do that right now, go ask somebody else, I would say yes. And that over time, that became a huge burden and something that I had to clean up and deal with. And it was a mess. And so I'm imparting that. So that goes back to my own discernment of myself, like being so keyed into my own self. Oh, am I saying yes out of obligation? Am I saying yes? Am I doing something because I'm supposed to, because I'm thinking, no, that's going to make me more spiritual, or whatever the stories are. Discernment. Discernment. Thank you, Lauren.
That. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to say too, that I remember I told a friend that story and they were blown away that I didn't go with them. And I went, well, I didn't, like, it felt wrong. It felt like a trick. And I went, no, I'm not going to do that. And so, I mean, we have to discern, we have to go into our own feeling. And sometimes when we share these stories, some people will go, wow, where's your sense of adventure? You know, even though it was in my dream, I wasn't really awake in my dream. It's just making sure, like you said, that you're really honoring where you're at. And sometimes I don't do things because I just am tired and I'm not going to do it. And that's the thing. I can choose. So listen,
you can choose. We can choose.
You can choose. Yes, exactly. We can all choose, and we always have a decision all the time. And I do feel that sometimes I'm tested where it's like, oh, I don't really want to do that. And then sometimes I'll do it anyway. And then I'll go, okay, well, when am I going to learn this lesson? Hopefully I've learned it now. Please let me learn it now. So listen, I keep wanting to just call you Dia. Diomira, we are kind of near the end of our time together. I mean, the thing is that we didn't go into your first experience and what that was like, but I really feel you've painted such a picture. It didn't really feel like it was appropriate to try to take us back there again. I really think that if you're open to it, maybe you can come back on the show again in the future, because I feel that I was really fascinated as well to talk to you a bit about, the energy codes and ley lines and earth mythology, there's just so many different areas that we can go in. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you that you really feel called to speak about? And, I don't know if you have 2 minutes, not that you're going to answer something in 2 minutes, but I say that with love and respect, because you're just so well thought out. The healing medicine that you do as well, like the Bach flower or the forest and energy remedies. Can you talk briefly just about that? Only because I know they're available on your website. I had a look and I just find that there's so much healing that people can get from those. Are we able to just talk just real briefly about that as well? And maybe we can go into it in the future conversation.
So it's actually going to be super brief because you have no idea, but I actually just shared an email today with my community letting people know that I was closing the Essence store.
Oh, well, that is
so I am actually, that is pretty short and sweet. So that is not to say the Essences, I work very deeply with the essences, which are vibrational botanical plant medicines. They're this, poetically, I say they're the spirit song of the plants, the trees. And in some cases, I can collect the spirit song of the fairy kings and queens, and the spirits of places, and dragon energies as well. And this is like a very holy and intimate experience. And so that being said, because of the potency of this medicine, I have really felt called, like, they actually need to no longer be shared in a retail format. And I will continue to share them in my containers, so both in my private one-on-one work as well as my group containers that I lead, so that they can be really held in this really deep, like the people can feel that, receive that transmission and that initiatory experience that the essences want to bring them into, within a container, a held container. So that's the long and short of it.
I find, I mean, for me, I've been using Bach flower for many, many years, and Bach flower, in my estimation, is like flower essences that have been distilled, and then you take a couple of drops and they can really help you to heal on emotional levels. So if I'm having anxiety or something like that, or I just want some heart healing or a little bit of clarity in mind or something, there are drops that can really facilitate and assist with this. So I love how you're kind of making, basically what I'm hearing from you is you're saying, you know what, these are more sacred than just me selling them on my website to, quote unquote, random people and making a little bit of a profit now and again, with the amount of energy and love and attention that you've put into it. And I did feel that when I went to your website. I felt that from them, by the way. So that was really transmitted, at least to me, I got it. Yeah. So would you recommend that if people are interested in opening up to a little bit of that world, that they come work with you, that they talk to you a little bit about that? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I still have probably quite a number of resources on my site that can really help bring you into just the idea of what are flower essences. And as I said, I've extended that to not just flower essences, but tree essences and elemental essences and fairy kings and queens essences and dragon essences. So you can absolutely explore those sacred medicines and just feel if that feels like it might be a resonant pathway and a medicine that is calling to you. What I love about the essences and everything you spoke to about them, Lauren, is absolutely 100%. They work at a deep emotional and spiritual level. And what I also will say about them is that the essences are this interesting paradox where they're some of the most subtle and yet potent, deep medicine that I have ever worked with. And I've done probably 100 different modalities, both that I've trained in and experienced with other practitioners. And the essences are very profound in that it's like they walk you to the parts of you that you need to meet to become more fully who you are. That's the best way I can say it. And they do it, they don't, some healing modalities, they kind of like, they're a little intense. And the essences, they are powerful. It doesn't mean that you won't have to face something that wants to be resolved. It doesn't mean that this is not about like spiritual bypassing, but it does mean that they will never bring you into something that you're not ready for. They have this beautiful intelligence built in within them that modulates your experience, that makes it perfect for each person at the level of consciousness and where they're at in their journey and what their bandwidth is. And they just are extraordinary in the way that they open doorways that you're ready to walk through. And then of course it's still up to you, and you still got to do the work, and you still got to walk through that doorway, but they will bring you right up to the doorways. So they're very profound. And you can absolutely, I have different options. You can, schedule a call and we can chat about if that's exciting to you, or you can just explore and feel the energy on the site like Lauren did. And you'll know if these energies and this way of working is calling to you. I trust that.
Thank you so much for being here, my sister. I'll put a link to all your stuff as well in the show notes. I know you're not super active on social media, but I know that they can get a hold of you through your website. And I just want to thank you so much for being here today for the second time. And just sharing your gift. And thank you so much. I really just absolutely loved our conversation.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for having me. I have enjoyed every moment of it.